everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask Dr. Ada. We have been off air for a little while, haven't had anything on the channel for a few weeks. Well, that's because I'm a new mom and we've been just trying to get used to having our baby around and trying to spend as much time as we can with her. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you for the first time my birth story. A birth story is all the things that led up to you giving birth to your child. So I'm going to tell you that story today. And then finally, I'm also going to introduce you to my daughter. So let's get started. My due date was on a Thursday, and my mom had actually planned to come 2 weeks to my due date because, you know, babies can either be born 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after their due date. So my due date was on a Thursday, and I took a week off before my mom came. So literally I had been home for almost 3 weeks before my due date. So due date came and due date went and nothing happened. So this is me like looking online, calling my friends, checking out all the good websites and good blogs to find out what really it feels like to go into labor, because as huge as I was, nothing was happening and it didn't look like I was going to labor anytime soon. So I was doing a lot of research and I found out that labor actually feels like period cramps on steroids. Like labor feels like, I mean, people always say you know when you're in labor, but unfortunately for me, I never went into labor. So remember the time when I filmed my introductory video and I was like, this is my due date. So I filmed the video because I didn't know if I was going to go into labor that day, any day after, anything like that. So I was just trying to prepare. So nothing happened on my due date. So usually your due date is when you're 40 weeks, and then anytime between 40 to 42 weeks of pregnancy, that's kind of like the max they'll let you stay being pregnant, because the older the pregnancy gets, the older the baby gets, but then also your placenta, which is like your baby's lifeline, starts getting old. So it starts shrinking and the baby actually just doesn't have enough room in your uterus anymore, so baby has to come out, and then it actually becomes dangerous for the baby the longer the baby stays in. So my OBGYN had said that if the baby wasn't out by the day I'm 41 weeks, that I would have to be induced. So what is induction? Induction is anything they do to kind of get the process of labor going so you can have the baby vaginally. So because nothing was happening for me, they had to have me come in. There are different ways of doing induction. Induction by cervical ripening. They can do induction by helping you sweep your membranes, and they can do induction by giving you medication into your vagina. They can do induction by giving you medications through your IV or through your veins. Literally on the day that I was going to have my induction, it was scheduled, so I called the hospital and they said, okay, come to the hospital in about 2 hours, we'll be ready for you. I just kind of checked myself into the hospital, kind of like you check yourself into a hotel. So I checked myself into the hospital, and then the nurse came and she, did all my vitals, and the doctor came, checked me out. They kind of told me what was going to happen. So for me, I was induced with 2 medicines. The first one, because the first one didn't work. So the first medicine is something called Cervidil. So the Cervidil is a medicine that kind of just helps ripen your cervix. And ripening your cervix, just the most basic way to think about it is just to kind of kick your uterus into action of like, okay, expel this baby, like let's start this process. And it kind of helps, the Cervidil kind of helps to open your cervix. So when they say, oh, they checked the woman and she was 1 centimeter, she was 2 centimeters, it just means like how wide your cervix is opening. So, and the Cervidil, I'll try to see if I can find a picture, but the Cervidil kind of looks like a tampon. So the nurse is the one who inserts it into your vagina, and they try to put it as close to your cervix as possible so you can start the process of widening your cervix. So when that happens, usually kind of like kicks your body into labor, and then your body naturally like delivers your baby. But in my case, first of all, the things that happened, so the nurse didn't put it far enough. So the nurse literally put it like maybe like halfway, and because she put it only halfway, only the lower part of my body was kind of reacting. So I was feeling all these weird sensations, like hot and cold, almost like they put some kind of like minty thing in that area, and so it was just like tingling, and I was like, this doesn't feel right, like I'm not meant to really feel anything. So when we came into for the induction, it was like 7 o'clock at night. So by like 11, 12, I was telling the nurse, like, I'm not tolerating this very well, like this is very, very uncomfortable, I can't sit still, everything. So the doctor came in and she took a look at it, and they eventually took it out. And they said it's always good to use that form of induction first, because if there's a problem they can take it out, because there's a string kind of like a tampon. So they took it out, and then she said like we should wait till the next morning to try something else. So all night we all slept. It was my husband and my mom that were with me. So we slept, and by like 7 a.m. the next morning they inserted well, they already put in an IV in my arm, but then they started an IV medicine or intravenous medicine, medicine through my vein called Pitocin. So if, a lot of people have heard about Pitocin. It's also a medicine that kind of helps induce labor. So, you know, try and get your uterus going, and it's pretty strong, and since it's an IV and when it gets into your blood they can't take it back. It's always the second line, or, you know, it's always the second form of induction before anything else. Oh my gosh. So they started this, nothing happened for a long time. And usually they kind of put all these medicines in for like 12 hours and then try something else another 12 hours. So they did this Pitocin, let's say like for another 12 hours. So from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. I was like, I'm not feeling anything, like nothing is going on. Then all of a sudden they stopped the Pitocin. An hour or so after stopping the Pitocin, I started feeling like cramps, like I was on my period cramps, and I normally get very bad periods, but it was just a little bit different. Like it was like coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. So, and then I had realized I had slept and woken up, and that was when I was feeling this cramp. So I turned to my husband, who also happens to be a doctor, and I said, I'm feeling this thing coming and going. I don't know if this is labor, but obviously you're hooked up to a monitor. So then the two of us are looking, and my mom is also a nurse, by the way. So this is like a room filled with medical people. So we're looking at, my mom is like, you're having contractions, and I was like, really? But then she was like, they're not strong enough. They're like, you know, we're all looking at the monitor. They're like, they're not very strong, whatever. So then the nurse keeps coming and going, and she's like, do you feel that? Do you feel that? That's a contraction, that's a contraction. I was like, it feels like cramps, like it feels like period cramps. So I was like, she's like, yeah, I feel like period cramps. That, okay, since I'm having them and they're more frequent, I think they're like about every 5 minutes, that she's going to check me, which means that she's going to check my cervix to measure the size of the opening of my cervix. So she checks, and it's only 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter. Mind you, I've been like 0 to 1 centimeter since I came in for my induction. So this has been like overnight on the Cervidil, and after another 12 hours of the Pitocin, and I was still about a 1. So I was like, this is ridiculous, like nothing is happening. So like about an hour or 2 hours later, I'm still having the cramps, but then they like intensify. And let me tell you something about labor. When you go into labor, there are some people who know their pain threshold. They know that they can take a lot of pain, but some of us can't take pain, and you have to know how much pain you can take. I don't do very well with pain at all. So by the time it was like another hour to go, I was literally sitting up on the bed and was like, this is really, really painful. So it was like period cramps on steroids. And then my husband and my mom were like, no, these aren't the real, this isn't the real period pain, like this isn't the real labor pain. Like the contractions are still they're not very tall, because the contractions show up as spikes on the monitor. And so I was looking at what I was like, I don't want it to be that that, you know, that painful, because then, like, you know, the contraction will be a spike, and then if the contraction lasts for a long time, it will be a spike, and then kind of like a heel, and then it'll calm down. Oh my gosh, I was like, I need an epidural now. Now, an epidural is a medicine that an anesthesiologist gives you. It's a form of pain management. Anesthesiologist gives you through your spine at the back, and then it goes into your spinal fluid and it numbs you from where they give it, so like a point at the back, and it numbs all the way down, to your feet. So literally your feet feel like, you don't really feel anything down there anymore. Your feet feel really heavy, and you don't feel any pain or anything like that. And it stops all the pain that has to do with the labor pains and everything. So when I woke up that time, I was like, I need to get my epidural, and I know my pain threshold, so I wasn't going to do natural. People who do natural, kudos to you. They know their pain threshold, they know they can do it. I had several friends who did, but I can't do it, and I knew coming in that I was going to get an epidural. So, and I didn't want to get it late because, as the labor goes on, and you get wider and wider, it gets to a point where they can't do the epidural anymore because it could be harmful for the baby. So I told them that I was ready for the epidural. Please get the anesthesiologist, please get him to come right now. Oh my gosh. So I was like sitting up, and I was like, this is just like bad cramps. And the Pitocin had stopped, and they weren't giving me any pain medicine at all at that time. So I told the nurse to get the anesthesiologist and to get the doctor, just so they would check me. So the doctor came, and she said, instead of us checking you while you're in pain, let them give you the medicine, let them give you the epidural, and then we'll check you again. So I said, okay, no problem. So the anesthesiologist, who like honestly was really, really lovely. I remember him the most from the hospital because he was there and he had like all these jokes he was telling me to kind of like ease my pain and everything. So I didn't look at any of the instruments that he came with. I was just facing forward and looking at my husband, and the nurse was right there, and he did what he had to do at my back. So they give you a little injection, and then he will ask you if you feel anything to your right or your left, and then you kind of tell him yes or no. And I was answering him, but like obviously it's a needle, so you're nervous about it. But if you're nervous, just don't look, right? So just like focus on someone else, and then try and breathe in like. So that was just like me like trying not to freak out. And then also like they tell you to try and be as still as possible because they're putting something close to your spine, which is your spinal cord, which is very important. But the good thing about the epidurals is that they don't, it's in your spinal canal, but they don't go close to your spinal cord. So there's a measurement that they measure, and they try to obviously stay away from the spinal cord. So there are very, very little chances of paralysis or big accidents that people, or big mistakes that people get worried about, because they know where they're going on, on the scale of on the column of your spinal cord. So he put it in, and I was smooth sailing. What? Have you ever got? As the people who have gotten epidural, it was like heaven. Like I kept saying epidural was made by Jesus because I didn't feel anything. I was like, check me if you want to check me. And then like you're still getting contractions because your monitor is still like picking up your contractions, but I wasn't feeling anything. So they checked me and they were like, I'm still at 2. I was like, oh my god, still at 2. So the doctor said, let's wait. So obviously by this time it's like, let's say 11 p.m, right? So they said, let's wait, and then let's see if the contractions keep going, and if like I keep dilating. So like if I keep getting, my cervix keeps getting bigger and wider, opening up more and more. So I said, okay, no problem. I even fall asleep because the epidural has made all the pain go away. So then at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, like I just have like all these people like rush into my room and like wake my mom and my husband up, because my mom is actually probably not even really sleeping because she keeps looking at the monitor. And then I'm like, what's going on? And then they're like, oh, the baby's heart is falling. And so those are called deceleration. So a lot of times if something is going on in the process of labor, so for instance, the worst one is if the baby's head is wrapped up with the cord. Anytime you have a contraction, if you think about it, the baby's head is wrapped with the cord, and the baby's head is trying to come through the canal. So anytime you have a contraction which pushes the baby closer to the to your cervix to come out, the baby literally like chokes on itself with the cord. So then it makes the baby's heart rate go down. So if you're in labor and that keeps happening every time you have a contraction, it's very, very, very dangerous. And a lot of those babies, most times, you end up getting a C-section so they can go in and like unravel the cord from the baby's neck. So in my case, that would happen, but then also the baby's heart rate will also go up. So the baby's heart rate will go down and the baby's heart rate will go up. So it didn't really make any sense to us. But then, and I think they had been watching it for a long time, and the doctor came and said, we we've been watching it for a long time. We weren't too worried, but now I'm kind of getting worried because it's happening too frequently. So he said, and then he checked me again, and I was probably at like still at a 2. So he said, you've been in this hospital for almost 2 days. You're trying to be induced. Nothing is happening, and this is happening to the baby's heart rate. And he feels like we should do a C-section. So this is me. The epidural is still going because it's a continuous infusion, right? The epidural is still going, and everyone's kind of like, okay. I mean, everyone, my mom is, everyone is in the medical field, so we kind of understand and we know what the risks are, because C-section is a major surgery. But how long are we going to just wait? And nothing is really happening. Like, I'm not dilating anymore. So we all agreed to go get the C-section. So we went to the C-section. Thankfully, it was uneventful. The funniest thing that happened, the anesthesiologist was it was the same anesthesiologist who put my epidural, who came to the C-section, into the operating room for the C-section. The entire C-section happened in less than 30 minutes. The doctor who the OB doctor who did my C-section, you could tell he was like an older man, so he was just like a veteran. Probably he's done probably thousands and whatever, so he was very quick at it. But as soon as he took the baby out, he was just like, and we have a toddler here, guys. I was like, what does that mean? So I'm asking the anesthesiologist, like, what is he talking about? He was like, the anesthesiologist who was sitting down next to my face stood up, and he's like, oh my god, your baby's huge. So I was like, oh my god, are you kidding me? Like, no one, throughout the course of my pregnancy, no one ever said like, oh, I was too big, or the baby seemed too big, or anything like that. So baby was big, and I think because the baby was big, and my husband was also there too, and he went to take pictures. But I think because the baby was big and the baby wasn't like coming out, like I had to be induced. When she was born, she had some trouble breathing, so they had to take her to the neonatal ICU. So I didn't even get to see her right when she was born. And I think because she she wasn't pushed out of the vagina, some babies who have go straight to C-section, they still have some fluid in their lungs, and I think maybe some of that fluid got infected. I'm not quite sure, but long story short, that was how she was born, and she was sent, she was in the NICU for actually 5 days, getting antibiotics for that. And I always call her a very strong girl, because when that happened, she had to have a mask on her face. She had to get something called CPAP to help her with the fluid in her lungs, and then she also had to get antibiotics. And she was there for 5 days, like, this tiny baby. She has like all, they're poking her all over and putting all these, what we call lines. They're putting all these IVs all over her. They even had to put an IV in her head. And she just like did so well, and she didn't have, she only cried when she was hungry, and she wasn't fussy so much, and she was just like, she just took it all like a champ, like a king woman. So anyway, so that was kind of like basically our birth story. We ended up, staying in the hospital for a long time, just, staying with her. We stayed in our own room, but would go visit her all the time. I would go try to breastfeed her, which is another story, and I'll tell that in another episode. But that was how long we stayed. We stayed for quite some time, and it was a really good experience. It's one of those experiences that my mom says every woman has to have a child just so they can experience it, because it's surreal. There are actually a lot of things that happen that I can't remember anymore. Like, they just go away. I don't know why, but you one second you don't have a child, your stomach is growing, it's all fun and games. Next second, like, you have a child that's like your responsibility and all this stuff. So that's basically my birth story. If anyone has any questions about the stuff that happened, you can ask me and let me know. But the thing I always tell people about birthing and labor, now that I had my own kid, is things don't always go the way you plan. In fact, I never knew I wouldn't know what labor was, because I actually never went into labor, so I don't know what naturally going into labor is. But that being aside, just pray. If you're not prayerful, you should pray. because it's kind of a miracle, right? You literally give birth to another human being. But pray and then trust the people that you have around you, especially the doctors. And if you have any question or any concerns, if you're ever worried about anything that's going on, or if anyone in your family has any concern, speak up. Don't be quiet. Like, ask questions like, oh, why is this happening to, if it's your friend you're coming to stay with and you're not the patient, like, why is this happening to my friend? Or if you're the patient and if you're the mom that's there for the delivery, ask them questions like, why is this happening to me? Because everything can be explained, even if in the most basic of English, right? So if you're worried about something, what you're worried about can be a serious thing. So ask questions all the time and call the nurses as often as you can. And obviously this story I'm telling you is based on delivery in America, but I think it goes for anywhere you deliver. Don't always be quiet about things, ask questions and make sure people speak to you in a way that you can understand fully what's going on with you. So that's the way my birth story went. And I had a C-section. Baby came out fine, I came out healthy, and baby came out with a little bit of a hiccup, but she's also like very healthy right now. So like I always say, when it comes to deliveries, the goal, you may not get what you want in terms of how you want the delivery to go, but your goal should be healthy baby, healthy mommy. So if the grand plan you had, or the wonderful way you thought your delivery would go, if that didn't happen, as long as you're healthy, you come out of it healthy, and your baby comes out of it healthy, that's what you want. So now I'm going to introduce you to my daughter. So hang on for that. But this is Kemi. She was born at 9 pounds 7 ounces, and she was over 20 inches long. So this is her little cherub. She's very chill. She only cries when she is hungry, and when she cries for her hunger, you have to bring her food immediately. But otherwise, she's pretty chill. She doesn't like putting on her clothes. I think her sleeves stress her out. But yeah, this is our daughter. So I'll see you guys on the next episode, where I don't know what I'm going to talk about then, but I think I'm going to talk about breastfeeding, because I have a lot to talk about breastfeeding, and I've actually gotten some questions on breastfeeding too. So we'll talk about that in my next episode. See you guys later. Bye.